great affection, don't we, for TV shows, radio serials, things that really sort of, click that nostalgia button. Is only to see something from a period of time that you thought was a lot more innocent, a lot more easy to live through, all that sort of stuff. It can be pictures, it can be music, and as I say, it can be a TV show. Who remembers, of course, the likes of Charlie's Angels flicking their hair while running 6 miles in our heels, and of course getting the criminals to stop by simply saying freeze. Laughable when you think, but such nostalgia now when you look back. One serial over here on the 15th of January 1948 started on the BBC Light programme and turned into something of a phenomenon. And literally, the backstory behind this particular series was incredible, to say the least. I was lucky enough to meet someone who actually worked on the radio serial. And just to give you an idea about how successful Mrs. Dale's Diary was, we're talking around about 7 million listeners every single afternoon. Basically, it was a very simple format. There was a story, an ongoing storyboard, and every single day you needed to tune in to find out what was happening. Even members of the British monarchy loved Mrs. Dale's Diary. And then its main star was replaced in the early 1960s with a little bit of controversy. But what went wrong? Let me explain. Morning, lovely to see you. Thank you so much for taking the time out today. We'll have a quick wave. You're right. Did you have a favourite radio serial? I wasn't really the radio person. I grew up, of course, in the televisual age, but of course I realised how powerful the radio was. We all listened to the charts. Who remembers recording them from the radio? Remember doing that? And the DJ speaking over your favourite bit of the record. Ooh, that was annoying, wasn't it? But of course they all did it so you couldn't tape over them. Yeah, you realise that now, don't you? But Mrs. Dale's Diary, as I say, latterly featured this West End singing nightingale, Jessie Matthews, from 1963. And it was considered to be as big, if not bigger, than Queen Camilla's favourite, The Archers. Yes, it even started before them.
This is the drawing room. Isn't it a lovely room?
Oh, I remember it perfectly. Mary, don't you remember Lulu playing on the piano near the window? I can see that piano still.
Yes. Oh, Sally, doesn't it seem years since we came here?
But sadly for Mrs. Dale's Diary, it fell foul, of course, of the changing times. By the time, of course, 1963 had come around and Jessie Matthews had taken over, the Beatles were in full swing, the swinging 60s were swinging, and Mrs. Dale and her diary seemed a little bit tame. But what went wrong? Now, the main scriptwriter for many years was John Kilantony, and her first collaborator under a pseudonym was Ted Willis, later to create, of course, the brilliant Dixon of Dock Green, which starred a brilliant actor, Jack Warner. The lead character, Mrs. Dale, was played by Ellis Powell until she was rather cruelly dismissed in a controversial circumstance in 1963 to be replaced by Jessie Matthews. Now, Jessie Matthews had been a huge film star, a musical star, in the same genre really of Sarah Brightman of Andrew Lloyd Webber fame. However, on February the 19th, 1963, a plump and embittered 56-year-old character actress called Ellis Powell walked out of Broadcasting House for the last time. She was not a star, in fact she'd earned less than £30 a week, but her voice was well known in Britain as of that of Queen Elizabeth II, for it was heard twice a day, 7 days a week, 7 million devoted listeners. Miss Powell was Britain's most, fictional paragon. After 15 years in the role she had created, the BBC had decided to fire her, partly because of her drinking habits and partly because it felt that the role and of course the entire programme was in need of a facelift. Sadly, 3 months later, at the age of 57, she died. Her friends believe she never recovered from the shock and distress of her dismissal by the BBC. In the last weeks of her life, she worked as a demonstrator at the Ideal Home exhibition and as a cleaner in a hotel. As you can imagine, that story never really made it to air, but a lot of people felt that the backstory of Mrs. Dale's Diary was far more interesting than some of the storylines they were now coming up with. Finally, the show came to a shuddering halt under the tutelage of Jessie Matthews in 1968, and with a very famous line, "I'm terribly worried about Jim." There are episodes that you can listen to online for free on YouTube. And as ever, I'd love to know if you've got the time, have a listen. Tell me whether you think it would work today. I think with a little bit of an update and of course a more modernistic twist, it certainly has all the, mixture and elements that would make people want to tune in and feel that they had a comforting friend to listen to at least once a day. Either way, Mrs. Dale's Diary now sadly mainly forgotten, unlike The Archers, which is still running on air even to this day, and as we know, a favourite of Queen Camilla. Neil Sean in the very heart of London.